Good morning. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. It is Wednesday, June 10th, and we're here in the 11 o'clock hour for our daily COVID conversation, our Facebook Live conversation with one of the many people that is impacted by the COVID outbreak here in the New York metropolitan area, across the country, and with a little bit of a Westchester connection. Our conversation this morning is with a person who happens to live in Westchester, but she has a very important job that affects this whole region. She is the president of Metro North Railroad. Her name is Catherine Rinaldi. She's a resident of Westchester County, and she's the first woman to hold that position, but she's got great experience in the transportation field with the MTA. And as I was reading her resume, very impressed, summa cum laude graduate of Yale and a law degree from the University of Virginia. So we're very happy to have Catherine Rinaldi both in her position and with us today on our conversations. Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning. Thanks so much for inviting me here today.
So Metro North is a lifeline for the economy of Westchester County. I think it's obvious to say. We talked just before we're off camera. I don't know if my statistic is right, but it's my understanding that at least 200,000 people from Westchester commute into New York City every day. And Metro North Railroad, I gather, had passed Long Island Railroad in ridership, during the pre-COVID days. Obviously, that includes people coming in from Connecticut as well on New Haven line and probably some folks west of Hudson as well. But it is really a tremendous lifeline for us to be connected to the city. And therefore, it becomes one of the most important services that's provided. You've been hit pretty hard by COVID-19 pandemic. Give us a sense of what was happening before and then now during this amazing turn of events.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, Metro North is really, one of the economic engines of the entire region. And last year, 2019, we had 86.5 million rides on our system, which is an enormous number. We were actually second to Long Island last year, but we're working on that. But COVID hit us hard and hit us quickly. And I think part of the reason for that is a lot of our customers work in industries where people were able to telecommute and they migrated to telecommuting pretty quickly. So, throughout the month of March, when this thing first started, our ridership dropped pretty precipitously and pretty quickly. So during the pandemic, we bottomed out at about 95% of our ridership down. Monthly tickets, obviously people weren't buying monthly tickets anymore. So we were, doing counts, and we were also looking at daily ticket sales. So we were about 95% down. And we're starting to come back, no question. As the Mid-Hudson, when the Mid-Hudson opened 2 weeks ago, and now the city is starting to reopen, our ridership is clawing its way back. But even after all of that, we're still down 90%. I mean, that 5% is not nothing. We're happy to see that things are moving in the other direction, but you can't sugarcoat the fact that our ridership is still down 90%, roughly, give or take.
The challenges of operating a system throughout this pandemic, the need to sanitize public spaces, both the cars that people ride and the facilities, the train stations, suburban train stations, as well as Grand Central Station. Give us at least a little flavor of what it's like to try to operate day to day and at the same time put in a whole new system of healthcare protections.
So fairly early on, after this hit in March, you'll recall that the first highly publicized case was actually in Metro North Territory in New Rochelle. We put into place a practice where we were going to disinfect, on top of the regular cleaning of stations that we were doing, we were going to disinfect all the touch points at our stations twice a day. And we've continued to do that throughout this, and we'll continue to do that in the future. In addition, we stepped up the cleaning of our trains, our actual rolling stock. So initially, at the very beginning, we were, in addition to regular cleaning, again, we would disinfect on top of that, and that would be on a 72-hour cycle. Since that point, about a month ago now, we went to a daily cycle. So in addition to sort of the normal cleaning that we're doing of the trains, we're also disinfecting those trains on a 24-hour cycle. And we've changed technologies too. We're not wiping down as much. We're using sprayers. We're looking at all kinds of innovative technologies to try to be able to keep the trains cleaner longer and make sure that they're as disinfected as they can be. Because part of getting, the other 90% to come back is giving people confidence that they're going to have a safe experience. And a lot of that is going to be associated with the cleanliness of the trains, the cleanliness of the facilities, and we're completely committed to people having a good experience and finding that the trains are as clean as they could possibly be.
I know in terms of your scheduling, you've made some adjustments. Certainly the initial adjustment from what was the normal pre-COVID schedule to the early days of the pandemic schedule. And you're juggling, once the governor established regions, you're juggling between the New York City region, which is one, and the Mid-Hudson Valley is second region, service into Connecticut, which is, you know, a different platform of priorities. Tell us where the level of service has been and where you intend to take it to, either short term or the longer term.
So, we took the service down beginning the end of March. And then on April 13th, we went to a straight hourly schedule. So 7 days a week, hourly trains, all three lines. And, in the depths of the pandemic, that was perfectly fine because really you didn't have that many people riding. The people who were riding were, the essential workers. So, healthcare workers, grocery store workers, and pharmacists, and our own employees. Those are the ones who were riding. And once things started to come back, we made plans to add more trains back into the schedule. So when the Mid-Hudson reopened 2 weeks ago, we layered some additional trains into the schedule on top of the hourly service. So we added 19 trains, at least that first week. We've been layering some additional trains in just as we see demand. One of the things that we're keeping, especially close eye on is the reverse peak. One of the things, or the reverse commute, I'm sorry. One of the things that we have that really distinguishes Metro North is that we have a lot of people get on the train at stations in the city in the morning. So stations like Woodlawn or Fordham or whatever, and they're traveling north or they're traveling east to job opportunities in White Plains or New Rochelle or across the state line in Greenwich and Stamford. So we're seeing that ridership actually pick up quite a bit. We added a train just earlier this week to be able to respond to that demand. So, we're just keeping a close eye on things. As you say, this is really unprecedented with respect to what it's done to our ridership. So we need to really keep a close eye on what we're seeing out there and respond. So the next plan is to go to a full-blown schedule change beginning this Sunday into Monday. You'll really see the change Monday morning. And what we're doing there is significantly increasing our peak hour service because that's when people are traveling, people are going to work. So we're adding significant increase, 115% increase over the hourly schedule. That's really focused on the AM peak and the PM peak so that people can get to and from work safely. We're basically leaving the rest of the schedule alone because we're not really seeing a lot of people ride during those off-peak hours. We call that discretionary travel. You don't really have people taking the train to go to a restaurant or go to a show anymore, right? They're just not riding during those off hours. But we're really looking to beef up the service during the traditional rush hours and a little bit before and a little bit after, just so that people can have a good experience when they get to work.
From the standpoint of planning, where is Metro North Railroad vis-a-vis the other suburban rail companies that are out there? Obviously, Long Island Railroad is part of the MTA family as well. There's always a comparison between the two of you. Although I'm from this area, I've lived in other parts of the country, the SEPTA system in the Philadelphia area. Washington Metro system is probably more of a subway than a suburban rail system, although it does go to the suburbs. How do we stack up in terms of the way the challenges hit us vis-a-vis those other systems as you talk to your colleagues?
Well, there's been a lot of collaboration and a lot of communication, with other transportation properties. And I think, to see what's happened to ridership, everybody's sort of, dealing with the same trends in terms of people, migrating away from public transit. And now what can we do to entice people back? That's certainly, a universal experience. We've also, had the ability to collaborate with other properties and see what they're doing in terms of cleaning and innovative, technologies, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of sharing and learning going on because, we talked about this a little bit before, the call started. This is not anything that we've ever seen before. So there's, the need for there to be a lot of sharing and collaborations among people who are going through this for the first time. What can we learn from each other? How can we, if there's another wave in the fall, how can we be better prepared? I think that there's just a lot of learning that needs to happen so that we're prepared to weather this for as long as it lasts.
There's also the question, and I've talked with many people in many other different areas of activity, private sector as well as public sector. The whole question of consumer confidence. How confident do people feel going to a restaurant? How confident do they feel going to a baseball park? How confident do they feel coming to concerts at Kensico Dam? And we as a government have had to make certain plans to open certain things, but close other things based on what we thought would be the projected response of people. They would be willing to go to a beach, but they would not necessarily be willing to go to an ethnic festival, which intrinsically has people close together.
Right.
How do you view the challenge of consumer confidence as you now start to open up more of your services? What do you think you do or don't have to do in order to build the ridership back from the standpoint of consumers feeling, I can get on a train, I'll be safe?
I think that's a really good question, because I do, we obviously hope that our riders will eventually make their way back and that they will feel comfortable and confident doing so. So I think, we've already spoken a little bit about cleanliness. I think that a commitment to keeping things clean and disinfected is really going to be at the core of what we're going to need to do to be able to keep the customers wanting to come back and feeling confident. The other thing I think is going to be the level of service. I mean, I think that social distancing is going to be, a challenge in a commuter environment, but we need to keep an eye on the schedule, right? We need to keep an eye on the frequency of the trains that we're running and make sure that, the service that we're providing is consistent with giving people an experience where they're feeling safe. There's no two ways about it. So we have, we're deploying station ambassadors to our busiest stations to kind of keep an eye on things on the platforms. We're going to be getting hand sanitizer dispensers at all the stations that we have. We're putting decals down to promote social distancing where people would have a tendency to queue up. We're piloting some decals on the floors of some of the platforms. We're a little bit worried that they might kind of peel off. So we have some heavy duty ones that we're piloting. If that works, we'll put those on all the platforms to promote social distancing. I don't think it's any one answer. I think it's, a toolbox of things that we need to do to be able to make people feel like the environment that they're traveling is a safe environment. But I also think, sort of apropos of our conversation this morning, I think, communication with our customers is an unbelievably important thing. Keeping the lines of communication going. I mean, we have a customer service group. When we get customer complaints, we act on them. If we hear about crowded conditions, we're adding trains in, just to be able to respond to that. So we need to be, explaining what we're doing, being really clear about what our objectives are, and responsive and hearing what customers are experiencing and being responsive and addressing their concerns. Because we've all been through this together. I mean, we're not just officials; we're people, and our families are sort of reeling through this. So when people are scared, I get that, right? I mean, we understand that people are scared, and we need to have a system in place to be able to have people feel confident that we care about their safety, we know what we're doing, and we will do our best to keep them safe.
It's interesting, just from a personal standpoint, this morning, I happen to be Roman Catholic, and my local Catholic church in Rye was open for daily mass for the first time today.
Oh, wow.
And while I don't want to project that, I'm more holier than anybody else, I did go to mass this morning, and it was different. The certain pews were cordoned off that you couldn't use them. And they had little areas where they expected you to sit if you were there. Now, daily masses don't get the same that a Sunday mass would. And my friends who are Jewish and my friends who are Baptist and so forth have different physical realities when they go to their services than I might as a Catholic. But it was a new normal. And then there, I stopped by the place where I usually get a cup of coffee in the morning, which is normally takeout. And for the first time, they had 3 little tables set up out in front, right on the main drag in my home community. And I was able to sit at one of those tables and have my coffee and go through my phone messages. And it struck me, just as you said a second ago, on a personal human being level, there is now a new normal, and it's starting to come back, but it's not coming back full force. I'm not in the middle of the church full force. I'm not sitting at the coffee shop back or luncheonette counter, just as always. It's different, and it's an adjustment. There are some things, though, that you've continued to work on through this period of time. Certainly capital projects have been on your list. We obviously here in Westchester, along with our colleagues in the Bronx, have been big supporters of the West Side Access Project, which would take New Haven line trains through the Bronx and then into Penn Station. Can you give us an update on that particular project, and then more importantly on the more proximate capital projects that you've been working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Penn Access project that you've been referring to is actually being run out of MTA. They have a construction and development group. So they've been working very collaboratively with Amtrak, because as you'll remember, that's, it's actually going to be a project that's built along Amtrak property. So we need to work collaboratively with them in terms of, advancing agreements that are necessary to be able to move the project forward, continuing to work on design, continuing to work on the environmental review. So yeah, that project has been moving forward, aggressively during the entire pandemic, which is great. And then a little bit closer to home, anybody who is familiar with the White Plains Station will see that that work is continuing. I mean, that's a major, major station rehab. And we had made very good progress before the pandemic started, and we've continued to make good progress. I was over there about 10 days ago now, and you can't sugarcoat that either. It's a mess, but it's a mess because there's so much going on. We demolished the northbound platform. We're extending the platforms. We're doing all this work in the lobby. We're putting in a new elevator. So, actually, in a certain respect, it's almost good that we have fewer riders because you have fewer people being impacted by how extensive the station renovation project is at White Plains. But that's going to be done by the end of the year. And it's our third busiest station after Grand Central and Stamford. So it's really a major, major station for us. And, end of the year, it's going to be done, and it's going to be beautiful. I mean, it's going to be absolutely, and the customers will see it. So I would ask for a little bit of patience if people start to come back over the next couple of months, because it is pretty torn up. But come December, January, it's going to be an absolutely beautiful station. And then the other thing I know that's close to your heart are the Mount Vernon bridges. The 3rd Avenue Bridge, we started demolition last month in May. We're going to be putting up girders in December. We've got 6th and 10th underway. We're making good progress on those bridges, which I know are so important to that community. So that's some of the big work that's going on.
Yeah, no, those are all critical capital projects. We see the White Plains Station from our offices here in downtown White Plains, and that station serves not only those of us who live in Westchester, but there are people from both Connecticut and even some from the other side of the Hudson, Rockland, New Jersey.
The bus service comes there, yeah.
Yeah, that bus serve into that area. So it's a very critical facility, and it's the one, if I wanted to hop on a train and go into the city, I'd walk the 3 or 4 blocks to get there. Longtime Rye resident that I am, I grew up in Mount Vernon, and I want to just highlight that, as you mentioned, those Mount Vernon bridges, that was very much a part of my youth. And the 3rd Avenue Bridge, whenever that bridge is completed, I know Mayor Sean Patterson Howard will be there for the ribbon cutting, but I want to be there because the first place that my parents had an apartment before they bought a house elsewhere in Mount Vernon was on 3rd Avenue. And as a little kid, I've always been in love with trains. And I have pictures, I recall it to some degree when I was a toddler. My mom would walk down to the train station, myself and my younger sister, over that very bridge, and I would sit. In those days, before we had the elevated trains that came in around 1970 or so, we had the old style New York, New Haven, and Hartford trains that go back to the prior generation, the old stations. And I could sit as a little kid at that train station, just watch the trains coming in and going out, wondering where they were going and being madly in love with trains. And I went over that bridge every day we did it. So I look forward now as an adult to see that bridge project completed for the benefit that it represents in Mount Vernon.
I'll see you there for the reopening, because I'm looking forward to that too.
Good. And just one other question, which has been on people's minds, obviously built off of a number of different incidents and issues, but positive train control is an issue that obviously is important. It's been a priority of your administration. How are we progressing on that?
Oh, so we're doing great. So this is for those people who are watching who might not know, so this is a technology that was mandated by the federal government after a serious accident in Los Angeles about actually more than 10 years ago now. And it prevents, most notably, overspeed derailments. And that's obviously something that we're very concerned about. So we've made good progress on this project. So since the pandemic, we've continued to move forward. So we're operating with full PTC protection on the Harlem and the Hudson lines at this point in time. So all the way from Grand Central, all the way up to the end of those lines. So that's a great accomplishment. And we're now focused on the New Haven line. So about a month ago now, we cut in a segment from the Bronx up to right around Greenwich, and now we're focused on the rest of the New Haven line, including some upgrades that we need to make to our M8 cars. But it's been a bit of a challenge because of COVID-19 for 2 reasons. Number one, supply chain. A lot of factories that support a lot of these major projects were closed for a period of time, and it upset the ability to get some necessary equipment. but those have been resolved as the pandemic has eased. And also, in-person testing is just a little bit more complicated when people can't go to a lab, or people, you have to
Right.
worry about distancing on board a train or whatever when you're doing the testing. But I really want to give a shout out to my team, because they've worked through all of those challenges, and we feel very, very confident that we'll be done by the end of the year.
Well, Kathy, we've enjoyed our conversation, and certainly the county government as an entity is very invested in the success of Metro North Railroad. As we said, it's a lifeline. My father once said to me, when I asked him why he moved from Brooklyn to Westchester County, in that blunt, blue-collar way that he would tell his less than brilliant son, two reasons. Number one, it's near New York City, and number two, it's not New York City. We would be not as successful a county if we were not near New York City, and we wouldn't be able to access that city if it wasn't for the railroad that you so capably run. So thank you on behalf of Westchester, your fellow Westchester residents, for all that you do, and anything we can do to work with you, we'll be happy to.
All right, well, thank you for having me this morning. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Catherine Rinaldi, who's president of MTA Metro North Railroad, Westchester resident, and a good friend for the things that we have to go forward. I'm George Latimer. We'll be back today at 2 o'clock. We'll be out in the field. I believe we're going to be in Portchester, town of Rye, with the elected officials of those two communities to talk about what's happening with the COVID virus in those areas, and also to do a little mass delivery for some of the folk that can use it in that part of the county. Every day we're trying to be in touch with some of our different local municipal officials. If you saw earlier in the week, we had on the village mayors in Hastings one day and Croton the next day, and we're trying to give you a footprint of how we're doing all across Westchester County. But for now, take care. If we see you at 2 o'clock, in the meantime, stay safe. Thank you, Kathy.